Hi all, Kathy Beal of EmpowermentUnlimited.net here with my weekly look at how astrology has been playing out in the news and some ideas of what might be going on in the next couple of weeks. Plus, I'll look at one chart that many people have asked about. My usual collaborator, Louise Edington, is on a work assignment this week. She may also be otherwise occupied next week as well, so just know that. You can find how all of this affects you personally in my own forecasts on this channel, Professional Aquarian, and at my site, empowermentunlimited.net. And those are forecasts for every week, new and full moon, and month. And you can also sign up for my mailing list there and get direct notice every Monday morning of whatever I'm up to. Speaking of which, Tuesday night, October 21st, 7 p.m., I have a pre-Halloween gathering and reading party with Annette Dion via Zoom. The top orange banner on my site has a direct link to the scheduling, and I'm also going to put the link in the box below. Secondly, the second banner on my site has a link to my witchy and whimsy casual apparel line. Has two designs so far. Many more are coming. Sweatshirts and t-shirts and hoodies, etc. With a kind of witchy theme, appropriate for the season, but you know, the way a lot of us dress, they're appropriate year round. You can still have time to get one for Halloween at this point, but again, you're going to want to wear this no matter when. And also, my viewers and readers are entitled to 30% off $99 or more at Otter Spirit, which has gemstone bracelets and necklaces and other types of really beautiful jewelry through the Halloween season. I have the Halloween magic link also below. The code is Aquarian30, or if you want to buy less, Aquarian20. I think it's a great way to do some advanced holiday shopping. Okay, so I think that's it. Now let me get my notes of the news because there's no way I would do this one from memory. All right, now, as always, what I'm doing here is cherry picking. It's not definitive, it's not comprehensive, it's not exhaustive, although it is exhausting. Things that have happened since last week that play out the astrological energies that Louise and I have been talking about. And some to keep in mind are the solar eclipse opposite Saturn, authority government, from September. That's still going to be playing out for quite a while. Venus, values, people, relationships, opposite Saturn, um, and the Pluto stationing direct. Those are the big things going on here. Okay, so despite, we'll start with what's going on with ICE. Despite an order forbidding riot control weapons on journalists, a female reporter from WGN in Chicago was knocked to the ground and arrested and, later released. Um, Members of the Texas National Guard that were sent to Illinois were photographed and very unappealing to Pete Hegseth because they were full-figured men. So a bunch of them have been sent home for being overweight and unfit. Um, ICE has been prohibited from making courthouse arrests in Cook County, Illinois, which is where Chicago is, and an appellate court has upheld an order prohibiting the National Guard from doing anything other than being federalized. So, like, they're not supposed to take any action. Uh, all right. Macron appointed as prime minister the prime minister who just resigned. There was an explosion in a Tennessee military-grade explosives factory that's being investigated. Because of the shutdown, air traffic controllers have started walking off the job. The Department of Defense announced that, or rather, Hegseth announced that Qatar will have a training facility in Idaho. This spawned great MAGA outrage, including from Laura Loomer and Steve Bannon, and then J.D. Vance a day or two later disputed that either Hegseth said this or that it's happening. Let's see what that amounts to. Mike Johnson has sent the House home for yet another week, which does two things. Delays voting on it does a number of things. Delays voting on the shutdown, delays, he says, swearing in the new Arizona representative who's going to bring the number of signatures demanding release of the Epstein documents to the required number, and then releasing the Epstein documents. Okay, the Office of Management and Budget started firing employees. There were massive reductions in force Friday night last week at the Center for Disease Control, including the entire DC office and the staff responsible for the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. This was reversed by Saturday evening to non-essential workers. The Department of Education cut 20% of its workforce and wiped out the Special Education Office. So just about every employee who works to administer funding for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act got canned. The American Federation of Government Employees, Local 252, challenged all these. Oh, there was one more. Get this one. Cuts at the Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency. Initially, only 35% of the members were cleared to work during shutdown, and now that number has lessened to a much smaller number. But the American Federation of Government Employees, Local 252, lawsuit is getting somewhere. A court has issued a TRO against the shutdown layoffs. A court has blocked the Miami land deal for the Trump Library. The claim is that officials at the state-run Miami-Dade College, who owns the land, violated Florida's open government law when they gifted the property to the state, which then voted to transfer it to a foundation for the planned library. In the Venus opposing Saturn department, MTV is dropping all of its music channels. Dr. Demento has ended his 50-year radio program, which launched Weird Al. In the free speech arena, The Atlantic, Fox News, Washington Post, New York Times, NPR, Newsmax, I think several more, have refused to sign the Pentagon's new press access policy and had their press credentials taken away from them. I believe the only outlet that has credentials at this point is One America Network, only major outlet. Also, in the free speech arena, a federal judge reinstated a University of South Dakota professor who was suspended for a social media post calling a recently unalived individual a hate-spreading Nazi. Multiple airports are refusing to air Kristi Noem's video at TSA checkpoints, blaming the shutdown on Democrats as a violation of, among other laws, the Hatch Act, which prohibits using taxpayer funds for political purposes. And these airports started out as Buffalo, Charlotte, Cleveland, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Seattle, Portland, Oregon. It's expanded to Pittsburgh, Atlanta, JFK, LaGuardia, and Newark. There are probably more. Venus in Virgo opposing Saturn in Pisces. At the end of the zodiac, a typhoon hit Alaska, horrible floods. Homes were actually upended and moved by the water. Is there news coverage of this? I defy you to find much. The Bureau of Land Management has canceled the nation's largest solar project, known as Esmeralda 7. The collection of 7 solar projects in rural Nevada was set to generate up to 6.2 gigawatts of energy when complete, enough to power 2 million homes. And this has drawn criticism from the GOP as well as Dems. There's more in that. Well, I'll come back to that basic theme of things being terminated in a second. There was a military coup in Madagascar and celebration in the streets afterwards. James Comey, who has been indicted, the former FBI director, has moved to disqualify the acting U.S. attorney for Eastern Virginia as improperly appointed. The Department of Justice has refused to hand over documents in the trial, claiming that they are top secret intelligence, and the court has been rejecting pretty much everything the DOJ has put forward. There are two previous there are two other cases in other jurisdictions that found that the acting U.S. attorney was improperly appointed. So we'll see what happens with that. Thousands of Telegram posts were leaked to Politico, nearly 3,000, by young Republicans, many of whom are currently holding office, praising Hitler, glorifying rape, joking about gas chambers, and worse. And Vance said this was just joking. So you can get your visa revoked if you make nasty statements about a certain individual, but if you want to terrify large portions of the population, that's a joke. Our military has bombed yet another civilian boat. I think the death at this moment, I think it's like 27 people that we have killed, just not a declaration of war or anything. On the Pluto station, as Pluto Station Direct, which goes on for a long period of time, involves power, communities, big money. There was a ceasefire and in the Israel-Gaza conflict, and a hostage release and prisoner exchange. The living hostages were released. The ceasefire has already been violated on both sides. Watch this space. Also on the Pluto station, the Department of Justice got a court to give it access to the gun owner database of two Second Amendment organizations. It was announced that Biden has started radiation treatment for his cancer. In a big watch this space, Jack Smith made his first public comments on MSNBC, and you can find those online. Slightly more whimsical, but this fits. There was announcement of the planned restoration and reopening of a pub called the Eagle and Child, the Oxford pub where J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and other members of a group called the Inklings met weekly to discuss their writing. Fun fact, it's now owned by U.S. tech billionaire Larry Ellison's firm, the Ellison Institute of Technology. All right. Looking at Venus opposing Saturn and the Pluto station together, the Trump administration has frozen or canceled nearly $28 billion in approved funding for Democratic-led congressional districts and about 740 million, just under, in funding in 14 Republican-led congressional districts. In Illinois, the halted funding, which was secured after years of lobbying, this will be a through line, included new investments in clean energy, electric grid upgrades, and transportation infrastructure. In some cases, funding had already been partially dispersed, and work on the projects had begun. The Dallas police chief has rejected $25 million in federal funds for ICE. Trump terminated just capriciously in a press conference on Wednesday the $16 billion Gateway Tunnel project that would put a bridge between New Jersey and New York, which has been in the works for like 20 years. But he doubled the aid to Argentina to 40 billion. So we're fighting over healthcare tax credits for millions of Americans, and we are giving Argentina $40 billion. And now there's a plan to overhaul the IRS procedures to direct criminal investigations of large Democrat donors. Medicare reimbursements to doctors have been stopped until the continuing resolution is signed. This affects telehealth and hospital at home payments, which I think are programs that have been discontinued. And we will end with the one that will flow into the event we'll talk about. The 250th anniversary of the Marine Corps is going to be celebrated this weekend. Vance will be there, and Governor Newsom's office has received, but not confirmed, reports that Live ordnance will be fired from offshore vessels during the event uh, over the highway. So parts of I-5 may be closed beginning Friday, um, and this potential closure will affect a section between Orange and San Diego counties, cutting off a major artery, serving more than 80,000 travelers a day. All right, so let's look at, let me share my screen. Okay, this is my description of what we're dealing with in the next couple of weeks, and it's taking it through through the end of the month and looking at the aspects from the perspective of how they might affect political and collective events. And again, if you want to see what it might do for you, go to my individual forecasts. So next week brings, next week is going to be intense and crazy. I just want to warn everybody. And the stakes will get very, very high, and a lot of action is going to start. So the on the 20th, uh, 20th is a day for targeted strikes, for research, digging up all kinds of stuff, disclosures, secrets, things that have been investigations, things that have been going on behind the scenes, stuff having to do with crimes and crimes and murders and big money and research and possibly medical research is a piece of this as well. And this is going to lead to really, really targeted action. Mercury, the planet that rules what goes in and out of our mouths and minds, is going to be conjunct Mars in Scorpio. Mars is the god of action, it's the god of war. There could be, so this is one of those you think it and it happens kind of events. Form follows thought in a huge way. It could be kind of violent day, kind of vicious day. And you'll notice that I don't have October 18 on here. We're going to look at the chart for the No Kings marches when I get done with this. All right. So the Mercury Mars conjunction is going to still be kind of like hanging in the air when we get to the Libra new, excuse me, the Libra new moon on October 21st. Now, a new moon is a time of setting intention, setting goals, setting a new cycle in motion. And Venus, which rules Libra, has been through quite a bit. In the week that we're currently in, Libra is in a grand trine, a flow of energy, a round robin with both of the cosmic change agents, Uranus in Gemini, which is startling and disruptive and innovative, and Pluto in Aquarius, which is unavoidable change involving huge things. So this new moon, even though it's in the lovely let's all be friends, I like to have dinner parties and please give me a present with pretty bows on it, Libra. This time around, this is eyes wide open. This is really being aware of gritty conditions, new rules of engagement for how things are going to go. So this is, you know, people getting a backbone and saying, no, you don't. On the 22nd, we start to go back until the end of January, cleaning up some collective issues that have been floating around for a long time. Neptune, the planet that is the most unhooked from reality, influence in the sky, it's absolute transcendence and poetry and connection to spirit and everything, but it's also mental illness and lying and deceit and glamour and illusion. Neptune is going back into Pisces, the sign that it occupied from April 2011 until March 30th, 2025. So it's sliding back into Pisces. It's going to sit at the very last degree of Pisces, which is the most interconnected spot in the sky. And it's going to bring things back around, especially from March of 2025. Pin that time. We're going to bring it up again in a minute. So, there could be a lot of suffering or issues of suffering or issues coming back around again of how people have lied, how there has been grifting, um, and it's ongoing until the end of January, and then we don't experience this energy again in our lifetimes. Then we have a period of time when, following that, or as it's happening, there is a recurrence of an aspect. Actually, next week brings a recurrence of two aspects that we have had again and again and again and again. And that is one of the closer bodies in the sky getting emphasized, like, look at this, like a dog having its nose stuck in its business and being forced to acknowledge and deal with something, a wake-up call. And then there's a massive unbroken flow of energy, a round robin of energy. So what happens is there is a finger of God, finger of destiny, a yod to a body, and then as we're looking at that going, now what? Then there's this whoosh of energy. Well, what happens next week is that, um, first off, the general atmosphere, each of us individually, because the sun is receiving it, so we're all getting a huge finger coming down from the sky going, hey, what are you gonna do about this? For each of our individual cells, but the sun also represents the leader. It's time to evolve, time for something to come out, time for something to happen. Resistance is futile. And this gives way to the first of two grand trines in water. Now, these flows of energy, these grand trines that we've been experiencing, have all been in air since August. They've been intellectual, they've been information based, they've been communication based, they've been a bit theoretical. Now it's cellular, and it is emo to the max because it's in water. So Mercury, the planet that rules communication, still in Scorpio, is flowing to Jupiter in Cancer, which expands everything it touches, and it's bringing up big issues of safety and security and home and country. And then it's flowing to Saturn in Pisces, which is near Neptune. So we're just going to include Neptune in the mix. So this is flowing, flowing, flowing. Mercury in Scorpio is telepathic. It's communicating through your cells. It's unspoken stuff. But there'll be a huge tidal wave after tidal wave after tidal wave of informations and secrets and emotions involving security and home and family and country and authority and government and leaders. And there is nothing grounding this. Previously, when Louise and I have talked about the grand trines, there has been a point, usually Neptune, in fact, yeah, pretty much always Neptune, that has tethered the flow to the ground, to reality in some way. There's nothing tethering this. So this would be consistent with the dams breaking. In fact, the whole last week of the month is consistent with the information flow breaking about all kinds of crimes, sexual crimes, information, files, records. So the files that people have been fighting over, some of this may start coming out, and it may not come out in the way you think, and it will be overwhelming. Now, if you pay attention to international news, this stuff has been dripping in the royal family news in the UK. Perhaps it happens otherwise. But then this grand trine then gives way to action on the information, investigation, action, strikes. From October 29th to 28th to 29th, Mars takes Mercury's place in this flow. Mars, which is, I mean, it could be the military, it could be just anger, it could be men, it could be really, really pointed, laser focused action. And at the same time, Mercury, the planet that rules communication, moves into Sagittarius and becomes in an opportunity aspect with Pluto in Aquarius. This brings in opens a window to political and international news involving corruption, crimes, technology. So it is entirely possible that by the end of the month, all kinds of information is leaked, which would be a water way of going about things that involves issues that a whole bunch of us have been talking about for a very long time. And I will not be surprised if the file's information starts to leak from a foreign country, or if evidence is presented from that. I would not be surprised if the evidence that we've been watching slowly build about interference with a certain event last fall starts to really, really ramp up. And I would be braced for strikes, preemptive strikes, trying to divert from what is going on, which we have Exhibit A of shooting missiles off the coast of California. Okay, in that regard, let's look at the outlook for Saturday's No Kings events. Let me get the annotation tools up so I can make my crappy drawings. I have set this for Washington and noon. I think there are easily 2,500, maybe more, all across the country. And this one has two T-squares. Now, a T-square is a configuration that pretty much demands action. So what this one is the sun is in Libra, which is, and in the, well, ignore the houses because these events are going to start at different times all over the country. But the sun is in Libra and it is opposite a pair of dwarf planets or asteroids, Chiron and Eris in Aries. Now, Chiron is the wounded healer, Chiron is the abiding wound. This is also very angry. Issues of authority. I say Chiron in Aries is toxic masculinity, but it's also people just feeling like they've had their autonomy taken from them. And Eris is Mars's sister, so she is a warrior goddess as well, and she's in the sign that Mars rules, which is Aries. This is the troublemaker. This is you can't shut me up. This is the rabble rouser. Louise calls this the table tipper. She's the goddess of discord, and both of these things, uh, the government and the people saying, no, you don't. And they're both equally pressuring Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter amplifies anything it touches. So the fact that Jupiter is getting equal pressure here means you should expect not just record crowds in the street, but probably really excessive, supersized reactions to the crowds in the streets as well. And the whole thing is going to be who loves their country more, who loves their country. Um, there's a second, there is a second. The nodes, which are where we're heading and what we need to release, where we're coming from, the nodes are making a T-square. It's not connected to the other one. The nodes are making a T-square. Let me make this easier for you to see. Where's this? Okay. The nodes are making a T-square to Vesta, which is the asteroid that represents the state, the home fires. So this is all very, very much in two different regards, like what direction is this country going to go? And with the North Node in Pisces, that is we're all connected. We're a nation of nations. There are many, 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 many people here. The South Node in Virgo is setting up borders, setting up boundaries, setting up rules. So I do think that the projections for what is going to be in the streets may actually be under. This may be the greatest uh, strike for the fate of our country that we've ever seen. Now, I mentioned March of 2025. We had a lunar eclipse in March of 2025 in the middle of the month at 23 degrees Virgo, which is where the moon is late morning on the East Coast on the 18th. So the people are embodying, the moon represents the national mood, the people, the mood, the people are coming back to what was going on in the middle of March. Um, and that time, there were a couple of things. One of them was that's when news, that's when there was what's called Signal Gate, when a Signal app, unsecured chat had people involved that didn't have classified security clearances and openly talked about airstrikes, I think, in Yemen. So that is one thing that's part of this, but also at the time of this lunar eclipse, there were other things going on in the sky that were slamming Trump's chart, and I said a wrecking ball is being released. And wrecking balls sometimes, that can be like the taking a while to hit there, but this is the people being the wrecking ball. And there are scholars who say if 3.5% of the population takes to the streets and stands up against what a government is doing, the government is doomed. And that is being used as an explanation for why members of the GOP are saying this is a hate America march. I would say if there is a um, T square to Jupiter in Cancer, this is an I love America march. And that Jupiter is on top of the US Mercury. So it will be an expression of intense love for this country and its values. Note that one other thing I want to point out at this point, the Mercury Mars conjunction is going to have slightly, they're going to be separating. They're separating by a degree. We may still feel it. And this could speak to a plan to shoot missiles across a highway. Um, and that is trying the nodes. So trying the North Node rather. What is happening now is very, very targeted action that directly affects the future of this country. So I would encourage everyone who is going out to this. Whoops, I just noticed one more thing. Oh, sorry, sorry, sorry. Let me point one other thing out, and that is Venus, which is the planet that rules next week's new moon. She also is, I call her the social director of the skies. Wherever she is at any given moment, kind of sets the tone for how we're interacting with each other. She also represents the values, and there she is in the sign of the law and fairness and social justice, blah, blah, blah. Venus is in an opportunity aspect with Juno, which represents marriages, agreements, um, and she is opposite Ceres, which has to do with resources, the family, etc., etc. So, going back to my summing up here. Oh, actually, one more thing. This is what you get when I've only had one cup of coffee. The other thing I want to point out is it's okay. Neptune has just moved back. Sorry, it's in its very last moments in Aries. It will move back 4 days later on the 22nd. And it is in an opportunity aspect pretty tightly with Uranus. So they're, spiritual warriors, people taking, actually communicating uh, in unusual and new ways. The Uranus in Gemini definitely speaks to inflatables, to people doing really whimsical things. Um, and this is kind of like the last gasp of the ongoing configuration we've had since July of Pluto and Uranus being in a trine and Neptune being in the middle of it. We will come back to this piecemeal next year. But for this weekend, just I want you to keep this Mercury Mars combo in mind and be practice situational awareness. It would be wise to actually look into safety guidelines. There are suggestions to put your phone in airplane mode, various things to do and not do, to wear sunglasses or a hat or something that could make facial recognition technology just a little harder to work. Um, I applaud everybody who's going out into the streets, and I just hope I hope for huge numbers and safety. And I will, so I'm looking to, okay. So I will be back next week, and everyone be safe. Okay, bye.